Yes,
All the
all
bodies.
the bodies.
All the bodies. Everybody can come in and out of here. How about that? Can we just do that, please?
A recent report developed in collaboration with the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture takes a close look at inclusion in the workplace and its impact on employee well-being. Drawing on responses from thousands of arts workers across LA, the report measures 5 distinct elements of inclusion: equitable employment practices, integration of differences, inclusion in decision-making, belonging, and psychological safety, and reveals what truly makes a difference in the workplace. Quote, "We found that inclusion is an important driver of retention, job satisfaction, and likelihood to recommend an employer, and that these findings hold true across demographic categories." To explore these findings further, we're joined by Carmen Morgan and Michael Robertson from artEquity. They share their perspectives on how arts organizations can move beyond the numbers to foster learning, accountability, and meaningful change. Stay tuned through the conversation for more insights and find out how you can get involved in an upcoming training session this September. Here's Carmen and Michael.
At the time of this recording, May 23rd, 2025, we are in the one of the most hostile climates I know I've ever experienced in my life, directed at trans folks, at immigrants, at people of color. So I don't want to not speak to that context. That's the climate that we're dealing with right now, that we're talking about in terms of workplace culture. And they're very much connected. Pride Month is going to be in June, and this may even be aired in June. So in the midst of Pride Month, we are dealing with a climate of hostility, a climate of growing hostility that's being perpetrated really by the state, by the government. So I just want to start out with a couple of statistics in terms of anti-trans legislation. And this, by the time that this gets aired, will probably have increased, unfortunately. But as of today, there are no less than 905 bills that are seeking to block trans people from receiving basic health care, basic education, basic legal recognition, and the basic right to just publicly exist. 905 bills that are anti-trans. 100 of those bills have passed. 740 of them are still active, and 65 of them have failed. Add to that on May 8th, about 1,000 transgender troops are being separated from the military under the new Pentagon order. I just want to lay that as the context that we're dealing with right now, so that folks are having to fight for their humanity to be affirmed. That's the context. So within a workplace context, I guess I would say that at minimum in the workplaces, where we spend a significant amount of our lives, the effort must be intentional for folks, particularly folks who identify as LGBTQ+, trans folks, non-binary folks. Organizations must be intentional about what they call belonging, or what they refer to as inclusion, or organizational cultures that would be inclusive. They've got to be intentional. Without that intentionality, just know that the status quo is going to persist. The status quo is going to persist. I want to just say a couple more things about that, and then my colleague Michael, I'm sure, would have something to add. artEquity works within the arts and culture sector, which is often, people refer to it as being, very gay friendly, very queer friendly, so inclusive. And I would say that sentiment it's both an opportunity, but it also gives me pause and concern. It's an opportunity because we certainly can hold the arts to the highest standard of inclusion, to the highest ideal. But it also gives me concern because it might allow us to feel, and it does allow us to feel a false sense of security, that, the work is done. The work is done in the art sector. And it's not. There's a lot to do. And Michael and I, and, the work that we do with artEquity, we come face to face with that heterosexist, heteronorming, homophobic culture that is also in the art sector as a byproduct of our larger community, our larger society. And I already started off with those statistics, so we know what we're dealing with. Michael, I'll pass it to you if you want to add anything.
Absolutely, Carmen. I really appreciated what you named. I think for some of us queer kids, when, the theater, music class, those are so welcoming. You just feel like you're not the oddball when you're in that crazy little theater space. But then you get into the professional life of the theater, of music, of museums, and you realize that so many of those heteronorming practices, so much of that lack of understanding of the trans lived experiences are not in our organizations. So, I appreciate the question. What is the question or questions that organizations can ask themselves? And I just say, are you looking through the lens of what you don't know? What might you not know as you are building systems and practices and policies at your organization that may have just inherited anti-trans ways of being? What do your policies look like in your handbook? Do they support a heteronorming climate where we're talking about maternity in a very heteronorming way, as opposed to family-based policies that allow us to define family as wide as possible? So for me, Carmen, I'm thinking, how do we retrain our organizations to ask themselves, how might we be showing up unintentionally as not inclusive of trans folks and queer folks? Yeah.
Absolutely, I would agree.
Diving deeper into the data, we see that employees who feel truly included, especially LGBTQ individuals and women, are far more likely to stay with their organizations. This sense of belonging doesn't just improve well-being, it's also a key factor in retention and job satisfaction. So what can boards and executive teams actually do with this information? What practical steps can they take to build stronger, more inclusive workplaces that support both people and organizational success?
One very simple thing is to be an organization that goes on record saying that you understand the value of affinity spaces. Some organizations refer to them as, resource groups. And these are groups where folks who identify as LGBTQ or who identify as non-binary or as trans will have a space that is supported and sanctioned by the organization for them to actually not feel like an outsider, and for them to be able to take a pause and a breath. And for them, if that space supports them, they get to opt in to that space. But if that space supports them, for them to use it in a way that can guard against that outsider experience. And in some instances, those spaces move so effectively that they offer back to the organization very concrete things that they can do to continue to be an organization striving for more and more inclusion. That's one thing that's very inexpensive. It's cost effective, and more organizations have said they found it to be helpful, as they do this work. And the individuals in those spaces have found those spaces to be helpful. We've heard folks say, without those spaces, they might have left an organization sooner. Michael, do you want to share another practice or procedure that organizations can take on to be more inclusive and to interrupt some of their heteronorming practices?
Yeah, they absolutely, Carmen. The list is long, but I am thinking, we're in the arts, we're being creative, we are wanting to represent a wide range of experiences. So when an artistic team, an artistic director makes a bold choice and they're featuring a community that maybe hasn't been historically featured by that organization, the board can back up that executive leader, back up that team. So when we ask, what can boards do? That's what they can do. Carmen, we know an artistic director who received death threats because of their quote unquote gay agenda. So something leadership can do is back up those choices that are supposed to be choices that are manifesting the values that are stated by the organization. So back up those choices. And then, Carmen, I think there's some basics. Every organization has a handbook. Every organization has policies and practices. Let's review those. Where are we using binary pronouns? Where are we not inclusive of trans supportive policies? So literally, let's look at that handbook. Let's look at those bylaws. All of that can be reviewed for language that might actually be more inclusive and have folks feel more welcomed into the organization. Yeah.
And Michael, I agree with you there. And I would just say that featuring trans folks on stage and not more and more non-binary characters and queer identified characters shouldn't be bold choices.
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, we are in a climate where there's so much trolling and open hostility that some cultural arts institutions and some workplaces have to prepare themselves and guard against the kind of public attacks that they're getting. So unfortunately, it does take a little bit of courage, but it shouldn't. It shouldn't have to be a bold choice, and it shouldn't have to require courage. But I just wanted to underscore that in this climate, that we're dealing with right now, unfortunately, it does. Yeah.
Absolutely. Carmen, I would offer one more thing, which is organizations who leave their walls, which means that they get out in the community. Let's say that there's an incident, that there's a homophobic or transphobic incident at the coffee shop near the theater. You're in community with those businesses. You're in community with law enforcement. You're in community with those city council members. I think that arts organizations have a responsibility to get outside of our walls, to really say, wait, folks who are working in our building are actually having a bad experience right outside of our building. And there's a role to play in building those community relationships and holding a wider community to those principles that the arts organization holds. So I don't think it's enough to just, let's do what we can in our own little arts box. It's how are we actually building community around that box so that the entire experience of folks inside the building are actually, they feel supported on their way in and out of that building. Yeah.
And Michael, I just want to add two more, because I think that this is starting to be more and more just basic good practices. And the first is not assume that everyone is going to use the same pronouns that you might use based on your gender identity. And just create a culture where it is just a common practice for folks to be able to use the pronouns that most suit their gender identity. Just create a practice of that and not belittle that, and don't allow anyone to make light of that, but to respect it, and that it just should be par for the course. It's a common practice. This is just how we do. And more organizations do that. It's in signature lines, but still, there are those who make light of it. So that's just that's a baseline. And I think, thank goodness, more and more of us are moving in that direction. And then the second one that I would say, I think we may have alluded to this already, or Michael, you may have already said this. Just please simply have all gender restrooms. Just have all gender, fully inclusive restrooms. The other day, I went to a theater performance, and on their restroom, it said, restroom for everybody. Just that simple. Everybody. And I just felt like, all the bodies? Can you use them?
Yes, all the bodies.
All the bodies. Everybody can come in and out of here. How about that? Can we just do that, please? Because, I don't want to have to navigate and think through or make me going to the restroom a political issue. Does it have to be a political issue? I just got to go to the restroom, and I need it to be all inclusive. So that's, we think, just baseline.
While the report highlights many positive connections between inclusion and workplace well-being, it also reveals important challenges. Notably, LGBTQ+ employees report feeling less included than their peers, signaling that organizations still face hurdles in creating truly welcoming environments for all. This raises the question, what barriers might be standing in the way of lasting cultural change, and how can organizations overcome them to build workplaces where everyone feels fully included?
I'm going to point to just one very specific area that comes up over and over and over again whenever we're working with organizations, and then I'll pass it to Michael to let folks know how they can access more tools and resources. But when we're working with organizations and they say to us, we've been having these conversations, but it's just not sticking. We just find ourselves coming back to the same discussion over and over again. What we find missing are systems of accountability. So this is what we would say. If you find yourself committed and you've prioritized this kind of work and you're in it for the long haul, but it's just not sticking, ask yourself, what systems of accountability do you have in place? Because without systems of accountability, the culture, it might change in the short term, but it's going to revert right back to, the kind of cultural norms that are not inclusive, to heteronorming practices, to practices that are not totally gender inclusive, right? So ask yourselves what systems of accountability you have in place. And by systems of accountability, we're saying that you actually have to tie the importance of these values to real goals that can be measured, possibly to performance evaluations. Certainly, supervisors need to be able to have these skills, or they don't get hired. Or if they're already hired, they can't stay hired. They become a liability. So you've got to have systems of accountability. I'll share one more thing that's connected to systems of accountability, is have a feedback loop so that folks in your organization are constantly letting you know how they're experiencing it, and let it be anonymous. Give folks an opportunity, by any means necessary, an anonymous opportunity to give you feedback about how they're experiencing the organizational culture. And then when you get that feedback, believe it and respond to it, right? So systems of accountability, if you don't have them, create them, and create feedback loops. Michael, I'll pass it to you to get a little bit more specific in terms of where can folks get training, and how could they work with us if they wanted to?
Absolutely. Wow. There are so many resources. We love resources. We love creating them, and we also love amplifying other folks' resources. So I would say our website is a great place to start. We've got a resource library there that we're constantly updating. And then sign up for our newsletter. We want to make sure that we are meeting the moment. So our newsletter comes out 6 times a year, and it provides resources to meet the current moment. So whatever's happening in the world, we're really trying to respond to that in our messaging and our resources. You can sign up for that on our website. And
What's the website address?
Hey, Carmen, thank you. Absolutely. It's www.artEquity, all one word, .org. Thank goodness for editing. All right. Beautiful people, please go to our website. Please sign up for our newsletter. And there's one particular training that's coming up in a couple of months, Strategies for Change, on September 5th and 12th. It's a 2-part training, so you sign up for both days. And this is a really practical training. So we go beyond the theory of what does it mean to be anti-racist? What does it mean to be inclusive? And we actually get to practical strategies, responding to things that people in the training are wrestling with. So we'll be sourcing questions, problems, challenges, and bringing real-life solutions that organizations and individuals are using. So again, that's Strategies for Change, September 5th and 12th.
I'll be there.
All right. Hey, I'll be there too, Carmen. I'll see you there.
Wonderful.
Download the full report linked in the description below, and visit our website at smu.edu/DataArts to learn more about our research and resources.